Welcome to our first chapter Friday for Good Friday. I thought since a lot of kids can't do Easter egg hunts that maybe it would be appropriate to pick the book The Hunt. It's right here. I don't want to mispronounce that last name, so I'm just showing you the book. Okay. This does start with a little bit of a prologue. There used to be more of us. I'm certain of this. Not enough to fill a sports stadium or even movie theater, but certainly more than what's left today. Truth is, I don't know there's any of us left, except for me. It's just what happens when you're a delicacy. When you're craved, you go extinct. 11 years ago, one was discovered in my school, a kindergarten student on her first day. She was devoured almost immediately. What was she thinking? Maybe the sudden, and it's always sudden, loneliness at home drove her to school under some misbegotten idea that she'd find companionship. The teacher announced nap time, and the little tyke was left standing alone on the floor, clutching her teddy bear, as all her classmates leaped feet first toward the ceiling. At that point, it was over for her. Over. She might as well have just taken out her fangs, her fake fangs, and prostrated herself for the inevitable feasting. Her classmates stared down wide-eyed from above. "Hello, what do we have here?" And she started to cry. They tell me she bawled her eyes out. The teacher was the first to get her. After kindergarten, when you're free and clear of naps, that's when you show up to school. Although you still can get caught by surprise. One time, my swimming coach was so enraged by the team's lethargic performance at a school meet, he forced all of us to take a nap in the changing room. He was only making a point, of course, but that point near did me in. By the way, swimming is fine, but you don't do any other sport if you can help it, because sweat is a dead giveaway. Well, for us. Sweat is what happens when we get hot. Water droplets leaking out like baby drooling. I know, gross. Everyone else remains cool, clean, dry. Me, I'm a leaky faucet. So forget what that cross country and forget about tennis and forget about even competitive chess. Swimming is fine because it hides the sweat. That's just one of the rules. There's so many others, all of them indoctrinated into me by my father by the time I was born. Never smile or laugh or giggle. Never cry or get teary-eyed. At all times, carry a bland, stoic expression. The only emotion that can ever crack the surface of a person's face are the Heper cravings and the romantic lust, and I am obviously to have nothing to do with either. Never forget to apply butter liberally all over your body when venturing out in the daytime, because in a world like this, it's a tough task explaining a sunburn or even a tan. So many other rules, enough to fill a notebook. Not that I even feel inclined to write them down. Being caught with a rule book would just about damn me as much as a sunburn. Besides, my father reminded me of the rules every day. As the sun was going down over breakfast, he'd go over a few of the many rules, like don't make friends, don't inadvertently fall asleep in class. Boring classes and long bus rides were especially dangerous. Don't clear your throat. Don't ace your exams, even though they insult your intelligence. And don't let your good looks get the better of you. No matter how the girls might throw their hearts and their bodies at you, never give in to that temptation, because you must always remember that your looks are a curse, not a blessing. Never forget that. He'd say that all this while making my nails get a quick once-over, making sure that they weren't chipped or scratched. The rules are now ingrained into me. They're as unbendable as the rules of nature. I've never even been tempted to break any of them, except one. When I started taking the horse-drawn school bus, my dad forbade me from looking back at him to wave goodbye, because people never do that. This was a hard rule for me. Initially, for the first few nights of school, as I stepped onto the bus, it took everything from me to freeze myself and not look back and wave goodbye. It was like a reflex, an insuppressible cough. I was just a kid back then, too, which did make it doubly hard. I broke that rule only one time, 7 years ago. It was the night after my father had staggered into the house. His clothes were disheveled as if he had been in a tussle, and his neck had been punctured. He'd gotten careless, just a momentary lapse, and now he had 2 clear incisions in his neck. Sweat poured down his face, staining his shirt. You could see he already knew. A frenzied look in his eyes, a panic running up his arms as he gripped me tight. "You're alone now, my son," he said, through clenched teeth. Spasms started to ripple across his chest. Minutes later, when he started to shiver, his face shockingly cold to the touch, he stood up. He rushed out the door into the dawn of light. I locked the door, as he instructed me to do, and I ran into my room. I stuffed my face into the pillow, and I screamed and I screamed, and I knew what he was doing at that very moment, running as far from the house before he transformed, and the rays of the sunlight became like waterfalls of acid, burning through his hair, his muscles, his bones, his kidneys, his lungs, his heart. The next sight, as the school bus pulled up in front of my house, steam gushing from the horse's wide and wet nostrils, I broke the rule. I couldn't help myself. I turned around as I stepped onto the bus, but by then it didn't matter. The driveway was empty in the dark birth of night. My father was not there. Not then, or ever again. My father was right. I became alone that day. We were once a family of 4, but that was a long time ago. Then it was just my father and me, and it was enough. I missed my mother and sister, but I was too young to really form any attachments to them. There were only vague shapes in my memory. Sometimes, though, even now, I hear the voice of a woman singing, and it always catches me off guard. I hear it and I think Mother had a really pretty voice. My father, though, he missed them terribly. I never saw him cry, not even when we had to burn all the photos in the notebooks. But I'd wake up in the middle of the day and I'd find him staring out the shuttered window, a beam of sunshine plunging down his heavy face, his broad shoulders shaking. My father had prepped me to be alone. He knew that the day would eventually come, and though I think deep down he believed he was going to be the one who'd be the last, not me, he spent years drilling the rules into me, and I knew them better than even my own self. Even now, as I'm getting ready for school at dusk, the laborious process of washing and filing my nails, shaving my arms and legs, and recently even a few chest hairs, rubbing ointment to mask the odor, polishing my fake fangs, I hear his voice in my head going over the rules. Like today, just as I'm slipping on my socks, I hear his voice, the usual warnings. Don't go to sleepovers. Don't hum or whistle. But when I hear this rule, he'd say maybe just once or twice a year. He said it so infrequently, maybe it wasn't a rule, but something else, like a life motto. He'd say, never forget who you are. I never knew why my father would say that, because it's like saying, don't forget water is wet, the sun is bright, snow is cold. It's redundant. There's no way I could ever forget who I am. I'm reminded every moment of every day, every time I shave my legs, or hold in a sneeze, or I stifle a laugh, or pretend to flinch at a slip of stray light. I'm reminded of who I am. A fake person. The Heper lottery. Because I turned 17 this year, I'm no longer mandated to ride the school bus. I walk now, gladly. The horses, dark, gargantuan brutes that came into favor long ago for their game-finding ability, but are now consigned to pulling carriages and buses, can detect my unique odor. More than once, they've swung their noses in my direction, singling me out, their nostrils gaping wide like wet, silent scream. I much prefer the solitude of walking under the darkening dusk sky. I leave home early, as I do every night. By the time I walk through the front gates, students and teachers are already streaming in on horseback and carriages, gray shapes in a murky blackness. It is cloudy tonight, and especially dark. Dark is the term my father used to describe that nighttime. When the things get covered over in blackness, darkness makes me squint. It's one reason it's so dangerous. Everyone else squints only when eating something sour or smelling something putrid. Nobody ever just squints because it's dark. It's a dead giveaway. So I never let so much as a crease cross my brow. In every class, I sit near the mercurial lamps that emit the barest suggestion of light. Most people prefer a gray dark over a pitch black. That cuts down on the risk of an inadvertent squint. People hate those seats near the lamps, much too glare for them, so I always find a seat in one. I also hate getting called on in class. I have survived by blending in, deflecting attention. Getting called on in class puts a spotlight solely on me, like that morning when I got called in by the teacher in trig class. He calls on students more than anyone else, which is why I detest the man. He has the puniest handwriting ever, and his faint scribbles on the board are near impossible to see in the gray dark. Well, H6, what do you think? H6 is my designation. I'm in row H, seat 6, and thus is my designation. My designation changes depending on where I am. In my social studies class, for instance, I'm known as D4. Mind if I pass on this one, I say? He stares blankly at me. Actually, I do. This is the second time in a week you've done this. I look at the blackboard. It's got me stumped. I resist trying to make out the numbers on the blackboard, afraid I might accidentally squint. He closes his eyelids lightly and says, No, I won't accept that. I know you can do it. You always ace the exams. You can do this equation in your sleep. Students are now turning to look at me. Only a few, but enough to make me nervous, including the person in front of me, Ashley June. Her designation in this class is actually G6, but in my mind, I've always called her Ashley June. From the first time I saw her years ago, the designation has stuck. She turns around, looking at me with her opulent green eyes. They seem comprehending, as if she's at last caught on, that I've often gazed longingly from behind her lush auburn hair. The magnificence and dazzling color, wistfully recalling its silky feel in my hands so many months ago. She holds my gaze, surprise lighting in them when I don't flick my eyes away, the way I've been doing for years now. Ever since I sensed her interest in me, ever since I felt a pull in my own heart tugging toward her. H6, the teacher starts tapping the chalk on the board. Give it a shot. Come on now. I really don't know it. What's gotten into you? This is basic stuff for you. He peers at me. I'm one of the smartest students in school, and he knows that. Truth is, I could easily be the top student if I wanted to. Grades come that easily to me. I don't even have to study, but I deliberately dumb down. There'd be just too much attention on me. Look here, let's work on this. Just read the question first. Suddenly, the situation had intensified, but nothing to panic over. Yet. I guess my brain's just not awake yet. But just read the question. That's all. His voice now holds an edge of sternness. Suddenly I don't like this at all. He's beginning to take it personally. More eyes start to peer back at me. Out of nervousness, I begin to clear my throat. Then I catch myself just in time. People never clear their throats. I breathe in, forcing myself to slow down time. I resist the urge to wipe my upper lip, where I suspect small beads of sweat are starting to form. Do I need to ask you again? In front of me, Ashley June is staring more intently at me. For a moment, I wonder if she's staring at my upper lip. Does she see the slight glisten of sweat there? Did I miss shaving a hair? And then she puts an arm up. A long, slender, pale arm, like the swan's neck arising out of the water. I think I know, she says, and she gets up from her seat. She takes the chalk from the teacher, who is taken aback by her forthrightness. Students don't usually approach the board uninvited, but then again, it is Ashley June, who is pretty much the one who gets away with whatever she wants. She gazes up at the equation and writes down a quick flourish in large letters and numbers. Moments later, she's done, and she adds her own check mark with an A+ on top. Dusting off her hands, she sits back down. Some of the students start scratching their wrists, as does the teacher. That was pretty funny, he says. I like that. He scratches his wrist faster, demonstrating, and more students join him. I hear the rasp, rasp, rasp of nails scratching against wrists. I join them, scratching my wrists with my long nails, hating it, because my wrists are defective. They don't itch when I find something humorous. My natural instinct is to smile. Smiling is the thing I do by widening my mouth and exposing my teeth, and not to scratch my wrist. I have sensitive nerve endings there, not a funny bone. A message on the PA system suddenly sounds over the loudspeakers. Instantly, everyone stops scratching and they sit up. The voice is robotic, a man-female authoritative sound. An important message, it blares. Tonight, in just 3 hours, at 2 a.m., there will be a nationwide declaration made by the ruler. All citizens are required to participate. Accordingly, all classes held at that time will be canceled. Teachers, students, all administrative staff will be gathered at the assembly hall to watch the live broadcast from our beloved ruler. And that's it. After the sign-off chimes, no one speaks. We've just gotten stunned by this news. The ruler, who hasn't been seen in public in decades, almost never makes a TV appearance. He's usually leaving a palatial and other administrative announcements to the 4 ministers who are under him, like the science, education, food, and law ministers, or the 15 directors. There's the horse engineering, city infrastructure, the Heper studies, and so on, under them. And the fact that he's making a declaration is missed by no one. Everyone starts speculating about the declaration. A nationwide declaration is reserved for the most rarest of occasions. Over the past 15 years, it's only happened twice. Once to announce the ruler's marriage, and second, and most famously, to announce the Heper hunt. Although the last Heper hunt occurred 10 years ago, people are still talking about it. The palace surprised the public when it announced that it had been secretly harboring 8 Hepers. 8 living, blood-filled Hepers. To lift morale during a time of economic depression, the ruler decided to release the Hepers into the wild. Those Hepers kept under confinement for years were fattened and slow, bewildered and frightened. Cast out into the wild like lambs to the slaughter, they never had a chance. They were given a 12-hour head start. Then a lucky group that was chosen by lottery was permitted to give chase after them. The hunt was over in 2 hours. The event generated a surge in popularity for the ruler. As I walked into the cafeteria for lunch, I hear the buzz of excitement. Many are hoping for an announcement of another Heper hunt. There is talk of a lottery for citizens again. Others are skeptical. Haven't Hepers become extinct? But even the doubters are drooling at the possibility. Lines of saliva dripping down their chins and under their shirts. Nobody has tasted a Heper, drunk in its blood, feasted on its flesh for years now. To think that the government might be harboring some Hepers, to think that every citizen might have a shot at winning the lottery for the hunt. It sends the school into a tizzy. I remember the hunt from 10 years ago, how for months afterward I didn't dare fall asleep because of the nightmares that invaded my mind, hideous images of an imagined hunt, wet and violent and full of blood, horrific cries of fear and panic, and the sound of flesh ripped and bones crushed, punctured by the night stillness. It would wake me up screaming, inconsolable, even as my dad wrapped his arms protectively around me in a strong hug. He'd tell me everything was all right and it was just a dream, that it wasn't real. But what he didn't know was that even as he spoke, I'd hear the lingering sounds of my sister's and mother's wretched screams echoing in my ears, spilling out from my nightmares and into the darkness of my all too real world. The cafeteria is packed and boisterous. Even the kitchen staff are discussing the Declaration as they scoop food, synthetic meats, onto plates. Lunchtime has always been a challenge for me because I don't have any friends. I'm a loner, partly because it's safer, less interaction, and less chance of being found out. Mostly, though, it's the prospect of being eaten alive by your so-called friends that kills any possibility of shared intimacy. Call me picky, but the imminent death at the hands or teeth of a friend who would suckle blood out of you at the drop of a bat, well, that kind of throws a monkey wrench into the friendship building. So I eat alone most of the time. But today, by the time I pay for my food at the cash register, there's barely a seat left. Then I spot F5 and F19 from math class sitting together, and I join them. They're both idiots. F19 slightly more so. In my mind, I call them idiot and doofus. Guys, I say. Hey, idiot replies, barely looking up. Everyone's talking about the Declaration, I say. Yes, doofus says, stuffing his mouth. We eat silently for a while. That's the way it is with idiot and doofus. They are computer geeks staying up into the wee hours of the day. When I eat with them, maybe about once a week, sometimes we don't even say a thing. Nothing at all. That's when I actually feel the closest to them. I've been noticing something, doofus says after a while. I glanced up at him. What's that? Somebody's been paying quite a bit of attention to you. He takes another bite into the meat, raw and bloody. It dribbles down his chin, plopping into his bowl. You mean the math teacher? I know what you mean. The guy won't leave me alone and trick. No, I mean someone else. A girl. This time, both Idiot and I look up. For real? Idiot asks. Doofus nods. She's been looking at you for the past few minutes. Not me. I take another sip. She's probably staring at one of you. Idiot and Doofus look at each other. Idiot scratches his wrist a few times. Funny that, Doofus says. I swear she's been eyeing you for a while now. Not just today, but every lunchtime for the past few weeks. I see her watching you. Whatever, I say, feigning a disinterest. No, look, she's staring at you right now, behind you at the table by the window. Idiot spins to look around. When he turns back, he is scratching his wrist hard and fast. What's so funny, I ask, taking another sip, resisting the urge to turn around. Idiot only scratches his wrist harder and faster. You should take a look. He's not kidding. Slowly I turn around and I steal a quick glance. There's only one table by the window, a circle of girls eating there. The desirables. Everyone knows, by some unwritten rule, that you leave the table alone. It's the domain of the desirables, the popular girls, the ones with the cute boyfriends and the designer clothes. You approach that table only if they let you. I've seen even their boyfriends waiting dutifully off to the side until granted permission to approach. Not one of them is looking at me. They're chitter-chattering. They're comparing jewelry. They're oblivious to the world outside the sphere of their table. But then one of them gives me a lingering look, her eyes meeting, then holding mine. And it's Ashley June. She's looking at me with the same kind of wistful, longing glance that she shot me dozens of times over the past few weeks. I flick my eyes away, spinning back round. Idiot and Doofus are scratching their wrists manically now. I feel the heat of a dangerous blush beginning to hit my face, but I see, thankfully, that they're too busy scratching to notice. I quell my face. I take deep, slow breaths until the heat dissipates. Actually, Idiot says, didn't that girl have a thing for you before? Yeah, I think that's right, a couple years back. Still, she's pining after you. She's got the hots for you after all this time. Doofus wisecracks, and then this time the two of them start scratching each other's wrists uncontrollably. So that's kind of the end of the chapter. See how it looks? Oh, sorry. There you go. It's got that line there. But otherwise, if it were the whole, I guess, chapter, it would keep going and going and going to like, I don't know, page 40 or something like that. So anyways, I hope, though, that it literally whet your appetite. It's a world that you can kind of hear is a dangerous place for the main character. Let me do that. The main character to live in. And it becomes this super page turner with you completely worried about his safety. Is he going to make it? There's all these situations where he almost gets caught. It's just wonderful. So adventurous action. It sounds like it might be scary because he's talking about getting eaten and stuff, but it really isn't as much a horror as it is what's it feel like not to be able to belong and hide your true self and the action of it. Okay, so a thriller. I call it a thriller. So I hope you try it and that you enjoyed this reading, and I've enjoyed reading to you. Take care.